critical thing to get infusion and cash down the road. The politicians can talk about it, but the problem is every day they're burning time that small business owners don't have to play with.
As tens of Americans, millions of Americans lose their jobs and their businesses, one thing's become very clear. Something needs to change. The economic inequality in our society have only increased since the pandemic began. With so many people struggling to make ends meet, there need to be serious conversations about the best solutions for helping people move forward. And one of the things we've discussed on this show, universal basic income, a guaranteed income, is one way for us to not only close the gap of inequality, but also make sure that people can weather the storm until the storm ends. Now, UBI, as it's called, is controversial. Political leaders like Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Ed Markey have come out in support of similar plans during this pandemic. Now, a new survey showed that, in fact, 76% of all Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, support a guaranteed income. There have been attempts in the past to test out what happens if Americans are given a no-strings-attached income. The most recent, the Magnolia Mothers Trust, has been giving $1,000 payments to 15 low-income African-American mothers, allowing them to have some flexibility as they attempt to survive the pandemic. With me now is Aisha Nyandoro, the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which runs the Magnolia Mothers Trust initiative. Aisha, good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. You and I talked about this some time ago, in which there was an experiment in which these mothers were given this money on a no-strings-attached basis. To a lot of people, that goes against what they think work and money should be about. Tell me why it works and what you've seen as a result.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you so much for having me here to have this really important conversation. And what it is that we're seeing that cash does, it really does allow you the opportunity to have breathing room and to show up and not worry about your day-to-day existence because you know that your basic needs are taken care of. We did our first iteration of the Magnolia Mothers Trust where we ended our pilot in December of 2019, where those 20 families demonstrated that 100% of them indicated that their basic needs were met, that they were now optimistic about their future, that they were able to plan and had less stress. And prior to COVID-19 really having the impact that we're seeing that it has now, or will have long term, we did the lottery in the iteration of the next demonstration. So now 80 women, 80 families are receiving $1,000 a month for 12 months with no strings attached. And already we are seeing the benefit that this is having on their lives and their livelihood and their families. Women are telling us that despite the fact that they've already lost their jobs, that they've already lost hours, that they know that they'll be able to take care of themselves and their families. And like you say, and weather this storm for the duration of this storm, because this isn't a 2-month or a 3-month pandemic. We don't know how long this will end. So knowing that individuals have what it is that they need to not be stressed and to continue to still thinking optimistically about their future, that goes a long way right now.
I want to put up a map of the places in the United States where there have been experiments with universal basic income. When you and I first talked about this, we talked with Chris Hughes. Since then, Andrew Yang ran for president, and he popularized the issue. Kenya has the longest and largest running universal basic income experiment. Iran has a nationwide one. Alaska has something that's tied to oil funds. It's not called the same thing, but it's basically a rebate that people get because of oil money. Talk to me about how, when you're making this argument, you fight back against people who have it built into them that this is money for nothing. This is the same argument that people made about welfare. It's money for nothing, and it disincentivizes work.
So all of the research actually shows that it does incentivize work, that it actually allows individuals to work in a way in which actually makes sense for themselves and their families. But we have got to get to the place within this country where we stop connecting poverty as a moral failing and take moralism off of the reality of the fact that individuals are poor because a lot of these systems are not aligned to allow you an opportunity to get ahead financially and to have economic security. And as we move forward with COVID and see how in a relatively short amount of time, how this disease has ravaged our economy, it is bringing to light what we have been saying for years, that less than the majority of Americans have $400 for an emergency. We're seeing that play out in real time. So the reality that this poverty and this economy is impacting so many of us simultaneously, that shows that it's not a moral failing. It demonstrates that you cannot save enough, or you cannot be fiscally responsible enough in order to get out of poverty, or in order to have long-term economic security, if the systems in which we are all aligned to are set up in a way in which they de-incentivize work. And if they are set up in a way in which it makes it really virtually impossible for you to get ahead economically.
Yeah, the 330 million Americans, 40 million are food insecure. Over 100 million live in some form of low wage or poverty. I guess that can't be everybody's fault. One of the things we're realizing, though, is, we've got these $1,200 checks that have gone out one time to people, and most of that's run out. And as you said, most people don't have $400 for an emergency. So the bottom line is, if you had programs like this, you would actually create a level of economic resilience in the case of another crisis, another economic crisis, another pandemic. What we realize we don't have is no economic resilience for families, which means that when these things happen, the money has to go from the government to people anyway.
That's exactly right. And as we continue to have conversations about this, we are continuing to make the reality of this being much more stressful long term. We had the ability when we did the $1,200 a few weeks ago to actually make that be much larger and much more long term than we did. We made a decision, a woeful, ignorant decision not to do that as a country. So now we have to go back and say, okay, we still have to resolve this. We're talking about opening up the economy, but how do you open up the economy if individuals are still worried about their ability to pay their bills? How do you open up the economy when individuals don't know how they'll pay for childcare? So we are trying to put the horse before the cart. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and with this pandemic, we are going to be forced to our knees to really have some real honest conversations. So.
Let's do that. Aisha, thank you for having this conversation for a long time before now. Aisha Nyandoro is the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which runs the Magnolia Mothers Trust Initiative. It's worth reading up on this because I think we're going to need to have a lot more conversations about it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.